The wilderness stretched out like an endless ocean of trees, silent, vast, and untouched. Daniel had chosen this place because he wanted no one to find him. After years of fighting and wars that seemed to have no end and living in cities full of noise, betrayal, and restless faces, he had sworn to himself that he would build something with his own hands. No machines, no soldiers, no commands, just wood, stone, and fire. So far from any settlement, deep in the frontier forests of a distant colony world, he built his cabin. It was small but solid, made of pine logs stacked with careful strength, the scent of resin forever soaked into its walls. But to Daniel, this cabin was more than a house. It was his fortress of peace, his shield against the galaxy's chaos, his one attempt at living a life that belonged to him and no one else. Every nail hammered into the wood was a promise to himself. Never again would he be controlled. But peace has a way of whispering too quietly, and Daniel soon realized that the forest around his cabin was not as silent as he first thought. Night, when the stars burned cold above, he would hear things low murmurs carried by the wind, a ripple in the trees, as if something large moved through them. Sometimes he woke to find claw marks on the wooden posts outside, marks that no local animals should have been able to make. The prints in the dirt were strange too, almost human, but stretched, as though belonging to someone who walked both like a person and a beast. He tried to explain it away at first. This was a frontier planet, after all. Strange creatures lived here, yet each day the unease grew deeper in his chest. Still, Daniel refused to leave. The cabin was his. He had bled for it, sweated for it, endured the storms and broken tools and frozen nights. If something lurked in the forest, then so be it. He would face it the same way he had faced everything else in his life, by standing firm. He told himself this again and again as he chopped firewood in the cold mornings, as he sat by the fire. At night, staring at the shadows creeping along the edges of the trees, and yet, somewhere deep inside, he wondered if perhaps the land itself did not want him here. One evening, as the sky turned copper-red and the last light of the twin suns sank behind the hills, Daniel sat on the porch of his cabin. He had just finished a long day of mending the roof and was watching smoke rise from his fire pit when he heard footsteps. Not animal, not clumsy. Human footsteps, moving with deliberate calm across the dry leaves. Daniel froze. He had not seen another human in months. The nearest settlement was days away by foot. He reached for the old rifle leaning against the wall, his heart beating hard against his ribs. The footsteps stopped. Then, out of the thick shadows between the trees, a figure stepped forward. She was tall, her frame slim but strong, and her skin caught the last light in a way that almost glowed. Her hair fell like silver strands, her eyes an unearthly shade of violet. She was not human. Daniel knew it the instant he saw her. The way she moved, the way the air seemed to shift around. Her it was too precise, too fluid, too other. Yet what shook him most was not her appearance. It was what she said. She looked at his cabin, at the firewood stacked neatly, at the porch he had built with his own hands. Then she looked at him, her strange eyes steady and calm, and spoke in perfect English, her voice low but certain. "This is our home now?" Daniel gripped the rifle tighter, though he did not raise it. The words hung heavy in the cooling air. "Not your home, our home." She stepped closer, not afraid of his weapon, not even glancing at it, as if she already knew he would not fire. For a moment, Daniel could not find his voice. The woman, if she could be called that, stood just at the edge of the porch, close enough that the light of his fire lit her features. There was no anger in her face, no threat, only a strange kind of certainty, as if she was stating a fact that had always been true. "Who are you?" Daniel finally asked, his voice rough, unused to speaking to another soul after so long. She did not answer right away. Instead, she reached out and touched one of the wooden posts of the porch. Her fingers lingered there, tracing the grain of the wood. Then she turned her eyes back to him and said, "You built this place on sacred ground, and whether you know it or not, you've already tied your life to mine." A cold shiver ran down Daniel's spine. Sacred ground? tide lives, wanted to demand answers, to drive her away, to claim his solitude again, but for the first time since he had built the cabin, Daniel felt that this place might never have belonged to him alone. The forest had been waiting, watching, and now it had sent her. The fire crackled. The forest was silent. And Daniel knew with a deep unease settling into his bones that his life of peace had just ended the moment she appeared at his door. The night pressed heavy around the cabin, the forest holding its breath as if it too waited for Daniel's next move. He kept his hand tight on the rifle, the cool metal a fragile comfort against the unease curling inside him. The stranger had not moved away. She stood there with steady calm, violet eyes fixed on him, as if she had known all along that she would find him here, that she was meant to stand before his cabin on this very night. Daniel cleared his throat, the sound rough. In the quiet, "You didn't answer my question," he said, his voice low, steady but edged with warning. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly, the firelight catching her silver hair so it gleamed like threads of moonlight. "A keeper," she said softly. "A protector of this land. I was not supposed to reveal myself so soon, but you—" Her gaze flicked to the cabin again, to the smoke curling into the cold air, to the tools lying neatly by the wall. "You have changed things." Daniel frowned. The words didn't make sense. Protector. This land was empty. No one lived here. I came here because it was untouched. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something close to sorrow. "Untouched does not mean unclaimed," she whispered. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle inside him like stones. He had fought for land before, wars fought in deserts and jungles, wars where blood was spilled over soil that men swore was theirs. But this felt different. This wasn't war. This was something older, something that did not fit into maps or borders. He kept his rifle up, though his arms trembled slightly now. "You said this is our home?" Daniel pressed. "Why?" She stepped closer, her movement smooth, her bare feet making no sound against the wooden porch. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle, but he still didn't pull the trigger. Something in him refused to. She raised her hand, not toward him, but toward the cabin. She laid her palm flat against the wall, closing her eyes for a brief moment, as if listening. "The moment you placed the first log," she said, her voice calm but certain, "this place became bound. Not just to the land, but to me. You built with your will, and the land answered. Now we are tied. Your heart beats here. Your blood runs in these walls." She opened her eyes again, and the violet glow in them seemed sharper, deeper. "That is why it is no longer just yours. It is ours." Daniel shook his head slowly, disbelief cutting through his unease. "That's insane. This is my cabin. I built it with my hands. No one helped me." At this, for the first time, she smiled. But it wasn't mocking. It was quiet, almost sad. "You believe you built it alone? Do you not wonder why the storms never crushed your walls? Why the fires never reached you, though lightning struck the hills not far from here? Why the beasts that roam these forests left your door untouched, though their hunger is endless?" Daniel froze. He had wondered, many times. But he had told himself it was luck, stubborn luck. He had survived worse before, hadn't he? Now, hearing her say it, a chill ran through him. "You're saying you protected me?" he asked her. Smile faded, replaced by something heavier. "I am saying the land chose you, and through the land, it chose me." Daniel's chest tightened. This was too much, too strange, too fast. Yet part of him, the part that had always listened to the instincts that kept him alive in war, whispered that she was not lying. That her words, impossible as they sounded, carried truth. He lowered the rifle just slightly, though his body remained tense. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, his voice rough. She looked at him then, really looked, as if peering past the surface of his skin into the scars buried beneath. "I don't want anything," she said. "I am here because I must be. Because now, whether you like it or not, your life and mine are bound. This cabin stands because of you and because of me. If one of us falls, so will the other." Fire crackled between them. The forest stirred with a low wind, leaves rustling like whispers. Daniel felt the truth of her words sink into him like ice. He had wanted a life alone, a life free of bonds, free of ties. And yet, here was this woman, this strange, unearthly being, telling him he was tied to her forever. He should have felt anger, he should have shouted, told her to leave, raised the rifle, and demanded she never return. But instead, he felt something else. A creeping sense of dread. And the haunting realization that the peace he thought he'd built was never truly his. The stranger stepped back from the cabin, her violet eyes still locked on his. "I will return," she said softly, the words carrying a promise and a warning all at once. Then, before Daniel could speak again, she melted into the shadows of the forest, her silver hair vanishing into the dark as though the night had swallowed her whole. Daniel stood frozen on the porch, the rifle heavy in his hands, his breath loud. In his ears, the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the ground. And though the night was quiet again, he knew he was not alone. He would never be alone again. The morning came with a pale, washed-out sky, the kind of light that revealed every scar in the land, yet hid the true weight of the night before. Daniel sat on the cabin's porch, his rifle across his knees, staring at the line where the trees thickened into shadows. He hadn't slept. His mind replayed her words over and over. This is our home now, bound by the land. If one falls, so will the other. He wanted to dismiss it as madness, a trick of his tired mind. Maybe the isolation had finally cracked something inside him. But then he thought of the storms that had turned away, the wolves that had skirted past. His camp, without daring to cross the clearing. He thought of the fire that had never spread, even when the lightning had set whole ridges ablaze. Too many things he couldn't explain. Too many answers that suddenly fit into the puzzle she had. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face and stood. He needed work. Work cleared the head, steadied the hands. He went about chopping wood, the steady crack of the axe against the logs filling the silence. But every time he paused, he found himself glancing at the tree line, half expecting to see her violet eyes watching him again. By midday, Daniel set aside the axe and walked to the edge of the clearing. The forest loomed like a wall, dark and endless. He had lived in these woods for months now, yet suddenly they felt foreign. Dangerous not because of what was inside them, but because of what he now knew might claim them. Protector of this land, he muttered, gripping the strap of his rifle. Protector of what exactly? He stepped past the first line of trees, the ground damp with moss and fallen leaves. The deeper he went, the quieter it became, as if the forest itself hushed in his presence. Every instinct from years of combat told him he was being watched. He tightened his grip on the rifle and kept moving. Then, without warning, a whisper cut through the silence. "You should not have come here alone." Daniel spun, rifle up, eyes scanning the shadows. And there she was, again leaning against the trunk of an old oak, as if she had been waiting for him all along. Her silver hair fell over her shoulders, and the strange violet glow in her eyes caught the dim light. "You said this was our home," Daniel said, his voice low, controlled. "If that's true, I deserve answers. No more riddles." She studied him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, she stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the forest floor. "You built your cabin on ground that remembers," she said. "Long before your kind walked these woods, this place was marked. Not by stone or fire, but by something deeper. By those who came before." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean, those who came before? Indians? Tribes?" Her gaze flicked past him as if she were staring into a memory. Older than that. Older than names. Older than words. They lived with the land, not on it. They left no cities, no ruins, no graves, but they left their will, a binding, promise, that this place would always have a guardian. And now, she lifted her hand and pointed at him. "You woke it." The air seemed heavier suddenly, as if the forest itself was leaning closer to listen. Daniel shook his head. "That makes no sense. I didn't wake anything." I just built a cabin, chopped some trees, laid down logs, hammered nails. Her eyes softened, almost pitying. Do you not understand? Every nail you struck was heard. Every tree you cut sent a call. You built not just a shelter, but a claim. The land does not ignore such things. It chose to answer. Through me. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to push back, but deep down he knew she was telling the truth. He had felt it the moment she touched the cabin wall. Like, the logs themselves carried a heartbeat. So what happens now? He asked, the words harsher than he meant them. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. Now you accept it. This is no longer only your fight for survival. This cabin, this clearing, this place, it belongs to both of us. If danger comes, it will not be yours alone to face. Her tone shifted on the last words, sharp enough to catch his attention. Danger. Daniel repeated. For the first time, her calm wavered. Her violet eyes darkened, a flicker of unease breaking through. Something stirs in these woods. It has been waiting, watching. My presence kept it at bay. But now, with you here, with the cabin standing, it will come. It always does. Daniel felt his blood run cold. He had faced enemies before men. With guns, machines, storms of fire, but this was different. This was something unseen, unnamed. What is it? He demanded. Her gaze didn't leave his. The land remembers its guardian, but it also remembers what hunts guardians. The forest around them seemed to shift, branches creaking, though no wind blew. Daniel's grip on the rifle tightened. For the first time since building the cabin, he realized he hadn't built a home in the wilderness. It built a beacon, and now something in the dark had seen it. The night fell heavier than any Daniel had known before. Clouds covered the stars, and the air pressed close, damp and heavy with silence. The cabin's firelight flickered against the logs, throwing long shadows across the room. The table, his rifle propped against the wall within reach. His eyes never leaving the single window that faced the tree line. He was not a man, Azili's shaken years in combat had forged nerves of steel, but this was different. This was not war. This was something older, something that whispered not in words, but in the bones. She sat across from him, a strange woman who had claimed the cabin was theirs. Her hair shimmered silver in the glow of the fire, her violet eyes unblinking as she studied him. She hadn't spoken since sunset. She didn't need to. The silence itself carried a weight that pressed on Daniel's chest until he could stand. It no longer... What is it? He asked finally, his voice harsh, the sound of it cutting through the stillness like a blade. What's out there? She lifted her gaze to the window. For a moment she didn't answer, as though deciding whether he deserved the truth. Then she leaned forward, her voice low, each word steady, deliberate. The land gives a guardian. Yes, but there is balance. Always balance. A place protected draws what seeks to break protection. For every light, a shadow. For every defender, something to test the defense. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not an answer. I want to know what's coming. Her expression hardened, though her voice never rose. There is no name in your tongue. It is hunger, wrapped in patience. It does not live like the wolf or bear. It waits. It listens. And when the guardian rises, it follows. Daniel's hand curled into a fist on the table, hunger wrapped in patience. Something that hunted because he existed here. Because the cabin existed. He exhaled slowly, controlling the tremor threatening his voice. Has been waiting for me. Her eyes glimmered in the firelight. For us, the moment you laid the first log, it stirred. The cabin is a claim, and claims demand a challenge. If we fall, the land falls too. If we stand, she let the words hang, the weight of them sinking into the room like a stone into dark water. A chill wind rattled the window just then. Daniel shot to his feet, grabbing the rifle, the old reflexes burning alive in him again. He moved to the door, swung it open, and stepped out onto the porch. The night was still. Too still. No crickets, no owls, no sound of the forest at all. Just silence, stretched thin and unnatural. His pulse quickened. He had heard silence before, in deserts before ambushes, in jungles before an enemy struck. Was not absence, it was warning. Then it came. Not a sound, not at first, but a shift in the dark. Like the trees themselves bent under a weight that pressed between them. The clearing beyond the porch seemed to shrink, swallowed by shadows that crept closer, though the moon was hidden. Daniel raised the rifle, finger brushing the trigger, scanning every corner. Every shift in the branches. Behind him, her voice carried through the open door. Calm, unbroken. You cannot fight it as you would fight men. Steel and fire will wound it, but never enough. It comes not for the body, but for the bond. For us, Daniel didn't lower the rifle. He never did until he had a target. His voice was a low growl. Everything can be killed. You just need to find the way. She stepped into the doorway then, her form framed in the glow of the fire. Her eyes seemed brighter in the dark, glowing faintly violet now, and that is why the land chose you. The wind rose suddenly, carrying with it a stench-damp earth, rotting leaves, and something older, sour and sharp. Daniel felt it before. He saw it. Movement at the tree line, not like an animal stepping forward, but like the shadows themselves, thickening, crawling, stretching. His breath caught. The figure that formed was wrong, shifting like smoke bound into the shape of something that should not walk. Limbs too long, a head that seemed to bend where no neck should bend, eyes too dim embers burning red against the dark. Daniel steadied the rifle, aimed at the glowing eyes, and froze. The thing didn't move closer. It just stood there, watching, waiting. Her voice cut through the tension. Do not fire. If you strike first, it will never stop. It will hound you day and night until you are broken. Daniel clenched his jaw. Every muscle screamed to shoot, to do something, but her words held him like chains. Slowly, he lowered the barrel an inch, just enough not to provoke. The creature tilted its head, as if it understood. Then, without sound, it melted back into the forest, vanishing into the shadows as though it had never been there at all. For a long moment, Daniel stood frozen, the weight of his breath loud in his ears. Then he lowered the rifle fully and turned back to her. That was it, wasn't it? He said. She nodded, her expression grave. That was the warning. It has seen you. It will not forget. Daniel shut the door and set the rifle against the wall again. But as he sat back at the table, he knew the truth. He hadn't built a retreat, a place to escape the world. It built a battleground. Whatever came next, the forest was no longer silent. The next morning did not feel like morning. The forest lay beneath a blanket of gray light, as though the sun itself hesitated to rise. Daniel woke with his rifle already in his hands, his body trained to expect violence. Sleep had not come easy. Every creak of the cabin's wooden beams had dragged him back into alertness. Every sigh of the wind had carried the phantom memory of glowing eyes at the tree line. He stepped outside onto the porch, the boards groaning beneath his boots, and scanned the clearing at first glance. Nothing had changed. The same ring of trees stood tall and quiet. The same mist curled low across the earth. But when Daniel's eyes narrowed, he saw that the difference was subtle, but it was there.
Ow.
Trees were too still. Their branches drooped, as if burdened by some unseen weight, their trunks darker, almost slick. He crouched, brushing the dirt near the edge of the porch. His fingers came away damp, but not with dew. A black residue clung to his skin, sticky and foul-smelling like oil mixed with rot. Inside, she moved quietly, placing fresh logs into the hearth, her motions smooth and unhurried. Daniel stormed back in and slammed his hand down on the table, showing her the tar-like smear across his palm. "Tell me what this is," he demanded. Her violet eyes flickered to his hand. She did not look surprised. It is the mark of approach. The hunger presses closer now. It leaves itself in the soil, in the trees, until the land itself cannot breathe. Daniel's jaw clenched, so it's not waiting anymore. She met his stare without flinching. No, last night was its gaze. Today will be its touch. The words unsettled him more than he cared to admit. In war, an enemy moved with intent, tactics, weapons that could be measured. This thing, it announced itself like a storm, not through soldiers or guns, but through the earth itself turning. Foul. He cleaned his hand with a rag, the smell refusing to leave even after he scrubbed. By noon, the tension in the cabin had grown unbearable. The air was heavy, hot despite the cool outside, as if the fire in the hearth no longer warmed, but suffocated. Daniel kept pacing, checking the windows, his rifle always close. She, however, sat cross-legged by the flames, her eyes closed, lips moving in silence, as though reciting words he could not hear. Then it began. The first sound was faint, like the groan of wood under too much pressure. Daniel thought it was the cabin itself, but when the sound grew louder, deeper, he knew it came from outside. A tree at the edge of the clearing shuddered, leaves shaking violently, though no wind blew. Another followed, then another. Daniel moved fast, throwing the door open and raising his rifle. His breath caught. The tree line rippled. Shapes shifted. In the mist, elongated forms, bending, writhing. And then, with a tearing crack, one of the trees snapped in half, crashing to the earth. Daniel aimed instinctively, finger squeezing the trigger, and the rifle barked thunder into the clearing. The bullet tore into the mist, but instead of striking something solid, the smoke seemed to bend, ripple, and close again. Don't. Her voice thundered from behind him, sharper than ever before. Every bullet feeds it, but it was too late. The shadows of the tree line surged forward, faster than Daniel's eyes could follow. The mist thickened, rolling like waves across the clearing. Shapes began to rise within it, limbs that bent wrong, mouths that opened too wide. Daniel pulled back inside, slamming the door shut just as the first impact struck. The entire cabin shook, dust raining from the rafters. Something slammed against the walls. Claws, or something like claws, scraping down the wood with a shriek that made Daniel's teeth ache. He braced the door with his shoulder. Rifle in one hand, fury burning through him. You said I couldn't. Shoot it then. Tell me what the hell I'm supposed to do. She stood tall now, her silver hair loose, her eyes glowing faint violet like fire caught in crystal. You endure. That is the trial. You hold the walls. Deny it what it seeks. The windows rattled. One of them shattered inward as a shadowy limb smashed through. Daniel spun, firing point blank at the shape. The shot boomed, the recoil, slamming his shoulder, and the limb withdrew with a shriek that was less sound than vibration, rattling through his chest. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the cabin shook again, harder, as if the forest itself wanted to rip it apart. Daniel's chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes. He lowered the rifle just enough to meet her gaze. This thing wants me to break. She nodded, her expression fierce now. Yes, and you must not. The cabin stands as long as you stand. If you fall, all falls with you. Another crash rocked the cabin. The walls groaned, nails squealing as they strained in the wood. The sound of claws dragged across the roof above them. The fire sputtered, dimming as the air grew colder, as though the shadows drank the light itself. Daniel gritted his teeth, planting his boots firm against the floor. His voice was a growl, low and unshakable. Then let it come. I've held worse lines. But deep inside, beneath the steel in his tone, he knew this was not like any line he had ever held. This was no enemy he could outgun or outflank. This was a storm, ancient and patient, and it had finally touched the cabin walls, and storms did not retreat. The night deepened, though it was impossible to tell the exact hour. The mist outside had swallowed the moon, the stars, even the faint outlines of the tree line. The cabin now floated in a sea of gray-black void, its walls creaking with every unseen pressure. Inside, the air grew colder with each breath, and Daniel could see frost beginning to gather on the edges of the windows despite the roaring fire. The siege had begun in earnest. The first impact nearly split the door in two, the sound like a battering ram striking solid oak. Daniel staggered forward, bracing the wood with his shoulder as splinters shot across the floor. A chorus of scratching followed, dozens, maybe hundreds of claws dragging across the outside walls. The sound was maddening, a screeching cry that burrowed into his skull. He had faced artillery fire, He had endured nights under bombardment, but this was different. There was no rhythm, no predictability. Just chaos, pressing from all sides. The woman stood by the hearth, her silver hair shimmering faintly in the firelight. She had not moved when the attack began. Instead, she whispered in that language again, low and steady, her hands raised toward the flames. The fire answered her call, flaring higher, burning a strange pale hue, as if the logs themselves were giving off moonlight instead of heat. Daniel gritted his teeth and pressed harder into the door, feeling the wood bow under a weight that no beast should possess. It's trying to rip the damn place apart. He shouted over the noise. She did not open her eyes. The cabin is your shield. If you hold, it holds. If you falter. Another impact rattled the entire structure. Dust rained from the rafters, and one of the chairs toppled over, shattering against the floorboards. Daniel felt his breath hitch, his muscles straining against the unseen weight. His heart thundered. I can't just stand here and wait for it to tear us apart, he snarled, voice cracking with frustration. Tell me how to fight it. Finally her eyes opened, glowing faint violet. You cannot fight shadow with steel. To strike it is to defeat it. Only endurance denies it. Do not give it despair. Do not give it fear. Those are the weapons it craves. The words crawled beneath Daniel's skin like ice. Fear had been a constant companion in battle, something every soldier learned to carry. But here, in this endless night, fear wasn't just an emotion, it was the battlefield itself. If he faltered, if he gave in, the walls would crumble. The scratching grew louder, joined now by a sickening sound like heavy breath against the wood, moist and ragged. Then, all at once, the window to his left exploded inward. Shards of glass sprayed across the room as a massive, shadowy limb forced its way inside. Its form was twisted, more smoke than flesh, but Daniel saw the suggestion of claws, of bones stretching impossibly long. The stench that followed was unbearable, rot and iron, like a corpse pulled from the depths of the earth. Daniel raised his rifle on instinct. His finger hovered over the trigger until he saw her face. Her eyes burned into him, fierce, commanding. Do not shoot, she hissed. With a curse, he dropped the rifle and instead grabbed the chair leg from the floor. Swung with all the strength in his arms, the wood smashing into the shadow's claw. The limb recoiled, not wounded, but denied entry. The mist shuddered, vibrating as though in rage. The walls groaned again, harder this time. Daniel felt the cabin tilt, as if unseen hands were pushing it from the ground itself. He fell to one knee, catching himself before the boards could throw him off balance. They'll tear the place down, he shouted, her voice cut through the chaos, unwavering. Then stand taller, soldier. You are the pillar now. The cabin is your will. The words struck deep. Daniel gripped the floor, his knuckles white, his entire body trembling as he forced himself upright again. His mind screamed to run, to break, to fire his weapon until it clicked empty. But his training, his stubbornness, and perhaps something older than both, chained him in place. The night dragged on in waves. The pounding at the walls came in bursts, each stronger than the last. Shadows slipped through cracks, only to be driven back by firelight or the swing of Daniel's chair-leg weapon. His arms ached, his lungs burned, and sweat froze on his skin, even as the hearth blazed with unnatural flame, and through it all, her voice never ceased. Low, steady, unbroken, she wove words that Daniel could not understand, but somehow felt in his chest. They anchored him, kept his will from snapping as the shadows pressed harder. At last, the attack slowed. The claws scraped less, the pounding dulled, the cabin creaked, but did not fall. Outside, the mist retreated inch by inch, rolling back toward the trees. The silence that followed was thick and unnatural. But for the first time since nightfall, Daniel felt the pressure ease from his shoulders. He collapsed into the chair by the fire, every muscle screaming in protest. His breaths came ragged, his vision swimming. He had fought no battle of bullets and blades, yet he felt more broken than after any firefight. The woman lowered her hands. her glow fading, her shoulders trembling as though the effort had drained her as well. For a long time, she said nothing, only watching the flames. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, cracked. That wasn't just an attack. That was a test. Her violet eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no mystery in them, only grim truth. Yes, and you endured. Daniel leaned forward, running a hand over his face. His chest still trembled, his body still fought to believe he was alive. He exhaled slowly, the taste of iron still heavy in his mouth. But it's not finished. Is it? The fire popped in the silence. She shook her head once, solemn. No, she whispered. That was only the beginning.